So, on this transformative episode of Victim to Victor, we are honored to welcome Dionne Eleanor, founder of the Body Sage method and a global leader in integrative wellness and trauma-informed healing. With over 14 years of international experience internationally across Europe, Australasia, Asia, and the Americas, Dion has guided thousands of individuals in transforming grief and heartbreak into meaningful legacies. Her methods help people cultivate governance and awareness of their body's emotional intelligence, using it as a gateway and tool for mental liberation and empowerment in their personal and professional lives. Dion's unique approach blends a rapid transformational therapy, hypnosis, intergenerational trauma, and ancestral healing, tantric philosophy, somatic practices, and relationship skills training to help individuals heal emotional wounds and elevate their lives. Dion, it's fantastic to have you here. I can literally go on. Your work stems as like just so many different specialities. I'm absolutely amazed. So good to have you here all the way from Mexico. Mexico.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Oh.
Hola.
And we've been talking about your amazing life that you have, traveling all around the globe, even though you do come from the UK. I absolutely love that. You're really living your life.
Yeah, I guess I've been this way since I was young, and my father used to say to me like he always used to say like, "Don't take this the wrong way, but you're very childlike." He said, "Not childish, childlike," and now I understood what he meant, and he would expand. And now I understand deeply what he meant. But before he would expand and say, "I just don't seem to have this filter," which I don't. Like I'm just like, "Oh, I want to go to Mexico." Oh, it's a lot of money. How can I get that money? Like my brain is definitely that way inclined, and I think it it's come through as well in my work with the Body Sage, in the way that I've looked outside of the traditional box to really create resources and tools that are effective and sustainable for the people that I work with. So yeah, so it's great to be here from Mexico.
Amazing. Yeah. So Dion, tell us about your life. What inspired your journey into trauma-informed healing and the creation of the Body Sage method?
Yeah, so a lot of things I would say inspired it, but in particular, one of the things in my personal story would be the relationship with my own experiences with grief and with loss. I had lost a lot of people in my life, and I had lost different versions of myself. And I had seen, in particular, my mother lose a sense of herself through different autoimmune illnesses and the loss of my father. And I just started to notice that there was a parallel between loss and the way that people were living their lives, and also that this area was deeply entangled with the way that we show up in our relationships. And so if I go back a step, I used to work in corporate and consulting and management. And so that led me to develop a brain that was very strategic and analytical and was able to really understand the value of data and metrics and science. And then alongside that, I was studying mostly for my own personal interest, and also to help myself heal from a severe spinal injury where my spine was slipped. It still is. It wasn't is slipped by 75%. A condition called spondylolisthesis, so technically a broken back where I shouldn't be able to do almost anything that I do sports wise now. And so I was studying yoga and meditation and all of these things on the side during my corporate working days. Now, in that time in corporate, I just noticed that I didn't see my team as just numbers or just people that were doing what I told them to do. I really saw them as people. And I started to notice what I call as hidden barriers to their success, which then created a barrier to my success, as a manager. So yes, there was that natural humane side of me as well, but being humble, like we are all in this together. And so that made me go deeper into what are these hidden barriers um, to our ability to create legacy and to show up in the world. And so for my team, it was a lot of pain in the body. It was problems in relationships, either at work or at home. And so that took me on a journey to going deeper into what I was studying outside just for myself and bring it towards my team. And eventually I started getting asked by different organizations in different parts of the world to go and teach and share the practices that I learned. And I'm a big believer in continuing studies. So every year I do study something as well. And then so in my personal life, going forward again to this story with my mom, because a lot of the work that I do now is particularly with women and their partners. And I do a lot of work with women and men that would identify as high achieving or high aspirational professionals that are really struggling to navigate huge relationship transitions, especially post-child release. And I say child release because we've got a language in the world which is very focused on birth and devalues and desensitizes around the loss of a child. So miscarriage, abortion, intentional abortion, post sexual abuse, or just wrong time, or abortion and then regretting it either way, or a loss of a child that is a little bit older. And so I started to notice that these were the women that I've been working with a lot. And my mother had a similar story to these women, and I didn't realize until I was working with my clients and saw that it all came full circle. So my mother had my older brother. His name was Nathaniel before I was born, and he died post childbirth. And throughout my life, from a young child, I was told about him, but as a child, you don't really understand the impacts or the importance. You don't really even understand death. But my mom has struggled with illnesses since that time. And I was very much focused on learning about wellness, not only for my own spine, but to help my mom and her autoimmune illnesses. And then I realized I was totally missing the mark. I was trying to treat the symptoms of her thyroid or Addison's. And really underneath all of that was a huge trauma around loss and around violation and disconnection to her body. So that's how I got into it, with a huge personal interest linked with my own life, my own life of loss in my family heritage, and just working with people over time as well to see the issues that they were struggling with.
Wow, beautiful. Thank you so much. That's such a thorough and clear explanation of your journey. And something that I find fascinating is spinal injury, because we know the consequences of a spinal injury. So how did that come about? How are you so mobile now?
Yeah, so I remember as a child, my parents were very much the type of parents that there's nothing wrong with you, and not in a horrible way, but they didn't want us to have labels. So one of my younger brothers would likely identify on the Asperger spectrum, but he was never told that he was disabled or that there was something wrong or that it was a disorder. They were very passionate about inclusivity, and that definitely was infused down, at least from my grandparents' generation, because they ran care homes and they were very passionate about treating people with dignity and not only through the lens of their disability and their needs. And so my spinal injury, I was actually born with a slight slippage, but it was never made a thing. My parents were like, oh, she's fine. But I did notice, because I always wanted to do something like I wanted to do ballet and I wanted to do gymnastics. And I was always kind of discouraged. And then when I did try and knee-jerk my way into gymnastic type things, I would always find it difficult doing anything to do with going over the back. But then fast forward it was 2008 that I was officially diagnosed, and the doctor pulled up my records. And the reason being was I was carrying on with my life, going to the gym and doing what I normally do. And one day after going to the gym, I woke up and I couldn't walk without severe pain, and I could barely take a few footsteps. Luckily, I was in a relationship at that time, and my partner at that time helped me and assisted me to go to the doctors, and they referred to me having a grade 3 spondylolisthesis congenital. And I said, well, what does congenital mean? And he said, well, you were born with this condition. It's just deteriorated slightly and destabilized. And I was so surprised because I didn't know that, that it was even in my records. And so it was something that I was born with that had deteriorated, and they didn't make a big deal, because sometimes, I guess, as well, not only with my parents, but with children, our bodies are so small that if they don't need to do something, they won't. They'll see if it sort of self-corrects through development. And so, yeah, so I was diagnosed then, and then I went on a journey to avoid surgery and self-heal.
Wow. Amazing, amazing. What a journey. And so a lot of your work now is based around rapid transformational therapy, RTT hypnosis. So how does that
Mhm.
actually differ from traditional talk therapy?
Yeah, so the way that it differs is that it goes directly into the subconscious mind. And rapid transformational hypnosis, RTT, so rapid transformational therapy hypnosis, to be fully correct, it's a blend of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is often used in psychotherapy, NLP, so neuro linguistic programming, which essentially in simple terms means rewiring the brain and planting in a new pathway in terms of thought, and then clinical hypnosis, which is basically using the access of the subconscious mind to unravel what doesn't need to be there anymore, or explore what is there. Now, a lot of people actually have been in hypnotic states, when you're watching a TV show or listening to something attentively, and everything else drowns out. So that's the first thing that I'll mention about hypnosis, because some people can feel a little bit apprehensive or worried that, I'm going to put a pendulum or a spiraling black and white circle in front of their eyes, and that doesn't happen at all. A talk-based therapy is really using the prefrontal cortex of our brain, and sometimes we access even what's known as like the amygdala and parts where we go into fight and flight, but we're really just in our headspace to try and make sense of things in the front part of our cognitive brain, and we're not really able to access the suppressed. So if you think about our brain as like a big storage bank, or a big chest of freezer, one of those big freezers, and every now and again, like, stuff gets at the bottom and you didn't even realize it was there for 20 years, and you're like, oh God, is that still okay to eat? And you think, better throw that out, right? That's how it can be with our subconscious beliefs. Like, things can be buried so deeply in there that we won't really get out through talk therapy. A lot of the time in talk therapy, we're talking about immediate stimulus as well. So we're talking about, we go into the session and we break down from starting with what's been happening in our immediate day before the session, how are we feeling in the environment now, and that's already half of the session. And then where do we want to go, right? And so where RTT really helps, it helps us to go into what's buried in there, to find out what's happened that we didn't realize was still affecting us. How are we viewing that? Because not everything that's happened, we're actually viewing it in a way that is supportive for our future. And then where do we want to go with this? And so both of them are really great tools. I wouldn't say talk therapy is something to be avoided. But RTT is great for people that just really want to get in there and like, a no BS approach to creating a big shift. The session typically also is around 3 hours for the session itself, and then you'll listen to a recording each day for a minimum of 21 days, but I always say a month, because human behavior means that we often might forget. Whereas talk therapy, we'll need to keep going back periodically, maybe once every week, once every 2 weeks, and you might not feel like you're making that same progression because of the space in between to slip backwards. So that would be the sort of the differences Does that sound clear? Make sense?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Absolutely. And so it's like, because obviously you do your private RTT sessions and you also have your pre-recorded hypnotic meditations. So what's the main kind of difference between them?
Yeah, so the pre-recorded is really an opportunity for people to have some empowerment with the way that they take care of their mental health. And it's more about nervous system regulation. So with pre-recorded, what I've done is I've looked for themes in our society and in my clients, which are common themes, maybe weight loss, maybe insomnia, maybe wanting to have more energy and more productivity, maybe wanting to heal the heart from heartbreak and grief. So in those pre-recordings, we're really only doing the transformation part of the hypnosis. And so there is a rewiring that happens with the brain. And I guide you into going into the hypnotic state by rolling your eyes up and everything like that. However, in the actual one-on-one session, that's where we're actually able to unpick what has happened in your subconscious. So, as an example, somebody might come to me for hypnosis, RTT hypnosis, and say, "Oh, I think my most funny one that I remember is a guy came to me and said, I want a session because I can't remember anything." And if you can imagine, like my whole session is designed behind trying to get you to remember. And
Memory.
then I didn't expect him to turn up with that. And I was really worried that I wouldn't be able to help him to recall from his subconscious.
Mm.
However, I was. So he came to me in the talk therapy, you could say, part of our session where he said, I can't remember stuff. I can't go back into the past, no matter how much I try. I put him into a hypnotic state. We were able to go back into his subconscious mind. We were able then to find out why he can't remember things. And actually, his problem, he thought his problem was that he had a memory problem. His problem was that he had a trauma that was unresolved, right? And so then I would make him a personalized hypnosis based on that trauma that's unresolved and his beliefs around it, rather than a hypnosis around improving his memory, right? And so that's where the difference is. The one-on-one really gives you the opportunity to find out where is the block, because our symptoms might actually have a different root in. So whilst you can listen to it's not to say if you listen to the, let's say, a weight loss pre-recorded hypnosis, it won't help you to lose a few pounds, but it might be a lot more effective if you've had the actual one-on-one, because there might be a deeper reason why the weight gain is there.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, so and talking about trauma, you use a lot of ancestral healing to heal past like intergenerational trauma. So how does that actually work in your practice?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of us are, especially in the world that we live in, right? Something that we were mentioning a little bit earlier off the podcast is that there's kind of a little bit of this rise of the individual at the moment, and no good or bad about it. It's just this individualist way of thinking and a little bit of detachment from family in some ways, whether it's intentional through pain or through family members being just damn right unhealthy, or sometimes through work and just different things happening in life. But we are still very entwined with what's happened in our lineage, because it's usually shaped the way that we've been brought up and our beliefs, whether we like it or not.
Mhm.
And so the way that I incorporate it into my work with my clients is by doing a lot of work with parental figures, especially with the nature of me working with women and men that are trying to bring children into the world or navigate child loss, and looking at what legacy they want to create and what impact they want to leave on this world. Usually there's some assets that we've been handed in our lineage in terms of the way things are done. So an example could be that a man is disconnected from his father, he wants to disconnect from his father because his father is a narcissist. At the same time, so he wants to know how to do that. At the same time, if he just cuts that father off, he might negate and lose consciousness about learning what he could learn from the positive side of his father, which is that he's a very good businessman and he had very strong skills in business, right? And so he could take that positive and negate the negative and just see his father as a human being. And so I get people to look at it from that sense. What do they want to carry forward from their parents and their grandparents and great grandparents, if they know what they want to leave behind? And also, what patterns might be unconsciously shaping us? You know, a lot of us might resonate with the message that I think almost everyone, even if our parents are pretty good, might say, oh, I don't want to be like my parents. I want to be like this other person that's nothing to do with us biologically.
Yeah.
And then we find ourselves behaving just like that family member in a small way.
Yeah.
We don't know what to do about it. And so yeah, so I bring it in there and just bring that elephant into the room so that we can really stand in our own power and who we want to be rather than who we've been conditioned to be.
Brilliant. Yeah. And do you find as well, that whenever we say stuff like that about, oh, I don't want to be like them, for some reason you end up being a little bit like them?
Yes.
What's
Yes.
that?
Like even, I mean, with me, like, dating, I've got this thing about video calls. And I was like, I just like video calls. There's nothing to it. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm entitled to have this desire.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, and my mom always needs to have a video call. I cannot say that's nothing to do with her, right? Like this, like I just had this epiphany that's probably connected with her, or like regardless, we're always on video call.
Yeah.
So I've been programmed, right, by my mom to associate love and connection with actual video call and value it higher than an audio call. And so if you even if you look at that, which is something just very simple and doesn't seem like anything of a big deal, that can actually, if you're unaware of it, can create conflict in a relationship where you can create a big deal about something and make yourself on this big pedestal of, well, it's just a video call, you're being so silly. And whereas somebody else associates the video calls with, video calls are all about, there's a serious issue. We only do video calls when like,
Work.
sorry, hits the fan and we're having serious talks.
Yeah.
Then you could get into a conflict because you're looking at a video, something as simple as a video call with two different lenses of love that are based on what's in your generational and ancestral history of patterns of way of being.
Yeah, interesting. So interesting. So, moving on to relationships and intimacy. Again, I'm just
Mm.
fascinated by the, different niches that you have specialized in, during your amazing journey. So, how does tantric philosophy inform your work at the moment?
Yeah, so Tantra is all about grace and coming into this space of the heart and presence. And in a world where we are quite often overstimulated and on the go, and even listening to respond, it really pulls us back so that we can be in true relationship with the other person rather than in relationship with a projection of the idea of the person or our own projection over them. And so, on my path to working with people, I mean, very, very early in the days, I just started with yoga and meditation. And many people following my move out of the corporate field know me as a yoga teacher. And it's really interesting because every now and again now I realize that people don't just see me as a yoga teacher now, and because I've been evolving over this time. But what happened on that path of being a yoga teacher, learning meditation and mindfulness, I started to get curious about why there were so many of these good looking, attractive, flexible, personal development people single. And that drove me down the lane of relationships. And Tantra has some roots in Indian philosophy and in yogic philosophy as well, the presence and the mindfulness act of it. So I weave it in with people in terms of the relationship they have with themselves, like really sinking into the relationship to themselves. So I usually ask people, for example, as a question when I'm working with them, if they can imagine what life would look like if they were the soulmate, or if God, if they believe in a God or higher power in a non-secular way, was the soulmate they were looking for, rather than them projecting out of this lack space, right? And how they could show up for themselves, and how their life would look if they really took a moment to be present with the color of green on a tree and the blue in the sky. Now, a lot of people have had this experience of presence, and they've used stimulants to get there, right? And so they love being in that state, but they've been socially conditioned to not realize that they can get into that space without the use of things like LSD and ayahuasca and mushrooms, and which I don't have technically anything against. I think there's a place for everything, but we don't need to be dependent on those. Tantra shows you that you can actually get into this space of appreciation just with your own being and with a practice of presence.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love that. And I know that you have a lot of involvement in the masculine and feminine energy work as well. So, how does the feminine energy play a role in fostering healthy and empowered connections?
Yeah, the feminine is expansive, and I would say it's the gateway to our emotional capacity, emotional fluidity, and our emotional intelligence as a society. And a lot of people may or may not be aware that feminine and masculine resides in all beings, regardless of gender or sexual orientation. And one of the things on this point that might sound a little bit disconnected, but I'd like to mention is that, over the last couple of years, I've heard a lot of talk about the patriarchy and masculinity and toxic masculinity. And those phrases used kind of in turn. And so one of the things I want to say is that patriarchy is a system that is based on hierarchy and control, but it doesn't equate to masculine or to men. It's a system in its own right. And so in terms of feminine energy and how it helps our relationships, it really gives us a chance to look at things from a non-linear space, and be okay with that, and see it as a circular, and that things can be a little bit unresolved, and they can be exploratory, and they can be this kind of, if you imagine like a bathtub, where we soak in the experience rather than need to analyze and order it. And I think that it's a very important part of us to acknowledge, because it's often, without this being determined as a negative, but it's often like the softer part, the part that allows us to surrender. And when I say softer, I mean it just allows us that place of rest, and that place of being. And so together, when we are aligned with our feminine energy and we couple that with healthy masculine energy, we can fluctuate between action and moving forward and doing, and relaxation and being. It's a bit like, I would say, the other way I'd refer to it as, the feminine is a little bit like our rest and digest in our nervous system, and the dominant healthy masculine is our fight and flight, or our parasympathetic nervous system. Our sympathetic nervous system, right? Which is all about action, which gets a bit of a bad rap, but it's great when it's when you need that adrenaline, right, to run from something, or to save yourself time to get to the hospital. Like, there's a place for the sympathetic nervous system, and there's a place for the parasympathetic, the rest and digest. So I would say that the two work together in our bodies, the masculine and the feminine, and in the world, the same way that the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous systems work together.
Amazing. Yes, I love that. I love that. And so you deal a lot with your clients who have undergone some sexual trauma. And so and I know that, you know, a lot of your kind of views around is that it is at the moment like a hidden barrier and it is overlooked in some of your clients. So can you comment more about that?
Yeah, well, when I was first niching my business, and I say that hesitantly because I took years to even get into this whole niching thing, and then I realized it's all about just allowing myself to be visible for who I serve.
Mm,
Um, but really, like my heart is open to whoever resonates and that I've got the skills to show up for. But I did think about marketing to people that have had sexual trauma, and then through research and through my own experience of observing myself and others, often people who have experienced sexual trauma, they get to a place and they're at a place of readiness for mentorship. They get to a place where they 95% believe that they are fine with it and that that isn't the number one thing that is causing their challenges in life. Like they think that, yeah, that's happened and maybe it's something to do with it, but this is the other thing that's really going on. And so setting up marketing for people to draw people in to know that you exist on sexual trauma can be a hit and miss depending on how you word it. So that's one thing that I noticed in terms of how it shows up. And then also how it's defined. So, a lot of men have shame or don't even feel that they have space to talk about sexual trauma, performance syndrome, the feeling that you need to always have an erection or that your partner has joked around about your penis is very traumatizing for men. Having one testicle bigger than the other or having something going on there medically is very traumatizing. Also,
mm,
um, for women, feeling like they have to have sex during a marriage when they don't really want to, and it's not rape, but they didn't want it to really happen. That's also traumatic. Having comments on the body, on your body during sex or after sex, that is a form of sexual trauma. So there's all of these different things that can happen in terms of sexual trauma that are on this spectrum. And I feel that sometimes what happens with sexual trauma is that it's made very black and white. It's made that you've either had this big thing that's happened to you, more than likely from a stranger or somebody that you've known, that you would never have thought that you would have known. Someone that you had known would do that to you, and it was very dramatic, or it didn't happen at all. And that's not necessarily the case. A lot of the time it can be very subtle, and it could even be that you don't even realize you're experiencing sexual trauma. So one more example I'd give is that let's say that your number one challenge is symptom of a challenge is that you're a people pleaser and you're always saying yes. And so you don't realize that you're experiencing sexual trauma post-child birth when you don't feel ready to have sex because you just don't know how to say no. But your body um, is getting a scorecard, and so is your nervous system because you're not fully relaxed. Maybe you're not orgasming. Maybe you're not finding lubrication down there. Maybe you just feel a little bit off after, but you're like, oh, that's just kind of,
mm.
it just wasn't that great this time. Because we can become a little bit desensitized as well from what we're experiencing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm sure many can resonate with that, to be honest, especially if you've been in an unfulfilled relationship. You know, energy doesn't lie. So, yeah, I
Mhm.
think it's definitely something to be more conscious about. But you have actually, like a lot of your work consists around doing rituals. Can you explain
Mhm.
a bit about what rituals are in healing?
Yeah, so rituals are, we've all got them in different ways. So the simple ones that we know of are things like weddings, funerals, birthdays, right? They're things that we do habitually in a specific order, in a specific way that's incredibly memorable
Mm,
to create a landmark and a stamp in a brain. And so it's like a positive reinforcement or a mark of time. And so I create these rituals, specific ones for different chapters, you could say, in my client's life. So anything from a rebirth of themselves. So this is the day that I'm stepping into my power, and this is the day that I'm choosing to be this version of myself.
mm,
And so one of the rituals that I've got for with people that want to go through that process can involve water if they're comfortable with water, or it can involve cacao, a ceremony of the cacao, which is a Mayan tradition of using raw organic, usually cacao, as a beverage, setting intention into there, and sipping it and doing breath work and having songs around it. Now, it can also be, another ritual that I have is on the opposite end is relationship end, conscious uncoupling. So this is the time that we are ending this relationship, and this is what we want to thank each other for, and this is what we want to let go of, and this is what we want to have as healthy boundaries going forward. And I think the rituals are very important because they give us, again, an opportunity for presence and to be proactive with our nervous system and with our health rather than reactive, right? So, for example, in the context of a breakup, or as I call it, if we want to turn it into a conscious uncoupling, it's even the best of people that are like, oh, we're going to be friends after, there's no drama here. There can be these like stressful moments because so much has been assumed.
mm.
Whereas an intentional space where you actually, maybe, or ideally, if you can, with the support of somebody objective, you go through all of the key areas, you just set yourself up for a lot better use of your time in this life.
Beautiful. That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you. And so you also do a lot of work around leadership because of your corporate background, I imagine. And so what is a current corporate leadership and management trend that you're a bit skeptical about at the moment, and why?
Yeah, so my work in leadership is really, rooted in this belief of feminine empowerment, and that as women, I wouldn't use the phrase that we can have it all, but we don't have to be afraid to step into that leadership role.
Mhm,
And that leadership role doesn't need to be in a company, it could be at home as well in a different way, right? To even to traditional sense, but you have governance and leadership over your life. Now, in the context of leadership in businesses, what I'm really passionate about is creating space for women to be seen around the different challenges they face. So I still remember, and I don't know if the manager will remember if he ever listens to this or will listen to it, but I remember being 22 and realizing that my male manager had no idea about my menstrual cycle.
mm.
I did not have it, but I wanted time off. So I just told him I had my period, and it was like he recoiled and I got whatever I wanted, right? And probably people, especially women listening to this, they might be like, yeah, I did that once too, right? And there's a funny side to it, but there's also, a sad side. And the sad side that I saw was that disconnection from healthy men that are naturally protective and curious and want to show up and understand and learn things, just had no idea where to start. And I met a couple of men that were single fathers to daughters through the loss of their wife passing away. And there's an actual need for them to know what's going on in the biology of a female body from that point, right? Otherwise, they are not able to show up potentially as a father. I mean, they could get out of it by hiring somebody, but that wouldn't be the same. And so, yeah, I'm really passionate about creating space and the skills. And there's still a lot of taboos around maternity leave. I don't know many women that don't feel a little bit nervous about when to take maternity leave, how long, will they still have their job, what will it be like, will they be respected, what happens if the child plays up at school. And it's a team effort. And one of the trends that you mentioned, what's one of the trends that I'm a bit skeptical of, is some companies talking about freezing women having freezing their eggs as an employee benefit, right? And so this is great in one way, right? Because that process is quite costly. However, at the same time, even though that gives an option for women that definitely know they want to delay motherhood and want to have that peace of mind that they can have their eggs frozen. It also, without having a system in place that's healthy for maternity leave and postnatal and women's health education in the workplace, it can also suggest that there's a devaluation of family, right? Because the truth is that, yes, you can freeze your eggs, but what about when you want to actually use them? Will there be space for me then, right? And so I'm just a little bit curious about where we're going to go with that, and I really hope that there's an active effort from more organizations to learn a little bit more and be curious about women's leadership capacity, and not look at it as necessarily needing to be the same as the way men are able to show up, because men have a different hormonal blueprint and they have a different biology and they aren't in a position to carry a child, but no longer look at it as inferior. So that's what I hope for.
Yeah, because I know you're all about inclusivity as well, aren't you? And cultural sensitivity. And because, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And so have you encountered many challenges yourself in advocating for inclusivity so far?
I think one of the challenges is that still the area of mentoring in anything to do with personal development can feel a little bit exclusive, and it can be challenging to really understand, or not understand, but create offers that are appropriate price and content wise for people with less economic resource. So the way that I've addressed that is that I really look at my price point as a price point that is fair to myself, that considers the time, when it's one-on-one, the time before the session, the time in between, the time on the session, and the value that I'm giving. I make a commitment, and then I allow there to be room for people to tell me that they have a different need, right? And so there's a sliding scale there, rather than me trying to bargain or drop my prices to a certain perceived level, because that can also be disempowering. And the other challenge I would say that I've experienced a little bit is just I think we're still developing space for the opportunity for, how would I put it? There's still a lot of misunderstanding from women about men, and that can create barriers for everyone in this world. And so there was a time before where I wanted to create a community of women that were advocates for men. I called it embracing men, and to really hold that space for them. But there was a lot of anger out there, from women saying that, it's a man's world already. What we need is a matriarchy. And I always say that I don't think the answer is the matriarchy. And I also don't think it's the patriarchy. I think the answer is us learning how to be more aligned in union. And so I do get the intention of the matriarchy, and I do feel definitely, the power of a woman, and I have my extremely proud moments. And then I look to the good men in my life, and I realize that I don't want them ever to feel displaced. And so one of the things I hope for is to develop more and more allies with that same intention, because even if it's not a direct focus in business or in life in general, it can come out energetically in the way that you show up, in the way that you do things.
True. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Hence the masculine energies taking over, and it's a bit difficult then to even form relationships with men because
Yeah,
yeah, because then there's two masculines, and yeah, I get it. It's tough on men as well because we have,
yeah.
we've just become so empowered. It's just a fact of life.
Yeah, a lot of men aren't really given the space to step into their feminine energy, right? And or they feel that there would be shame if they do. So it just creates this spiral of
Just
unhelpful behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, it's been such an insightful conversation. Thank you so much, Dion. And just obviously before we close, do you have any simple wellness practices that my listeners can actually adopt today for greater emotional resilience?
Yes, definitely. I would say that, well, one that I think that always makes people laugh and is super easy to do. But I always say I haven't met a person that can shake their ass, like literally shake, like tremble, twerk, whatever you want to call it, shake your hips vigorously
Mm.
and stay. Upset or angry. Like it just makes you laugh. It makes you silly, right? So one of the simple tips I would say is do that. But on a serious note, if you want to know why I'm saying to do that, is to move your body. Moving your physiology of your body has a huge shift on in terms of your nervous system. It changes your state of being.
Mm.
And before that, especially if you're feeling stagnant, connect into your breath. So before even changing your breath, observing your breath. So some people can't get into a space where they're counting. But observing your breath. Okay, I'm breathing in and I'm breathing out. The third thing I would say is don't try and do things in isolation, and don't think that you need to be mindful of self-isolating to the point where you create invisibility for yourself, right, unintentionally. Because a lot of people that probably listening to this, there's a part of them that maybe feels alone or unseen, and we have to take responsibility that we might be unintentionally creating that. We live in a world where there is so much more resources than ever before. You could be on a free group call where with your camera off and a different name, so you remain anonymous, but you can be in community there. There's books that you can read. There's like different websites where people will give mentoring sessions and support for free. I do also. I don't have it on my website intentionally because I don't want to get bombarded by people that book and then don't show up, because that happens. But if somebody reaches out to me and they do genuinely want some support and I've got that time, I will speak to them, and give them the support that I can. And so, yeah, just don't be afraid to look for that support. It doesn't mean there's a weakness. In fact, it's a strength. We are designed to be in relationship with each other. Science shows that we live longer in relationships. So try your best to reach out. And if you're feeling lonely and like you don't have that many people around you, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you either. It just means simply that there's a chance for you to change that narrative of your life.
Yeah, I love that. Fantastic tips. Thank you so much, Dion. And so where can my listeners find you?
Definitely. So you can find me on Instagram with my and LinkedIn with my name, which is Dionne Eleanor, so DIONNE, and then ELEANOR. And on Instagram, there's an underscore after. And my name is the same on LinkedIn, just with a space in between Dion and then Eleanor. And then my website is bodysageco.com. So that's BODY, body, sage, SAGE, co.com.
Beautiful. Thank you. I will be adding in the links to this show, and I'm sure they could all reach out with you if they want to work with you or if they have any questions. I'm sure you'll be very happy to hear from them, right, Dion?
Yes, definitely. And I've got a couple of retreats coming up. I do retreats on helping you to really annihilate grief and trauma. I've got one coming up in November in Mexico, and then I've got one in the Amazon rainforest next year about creating legacy. And I've actually, over the last couple of days, I created this really great resource, which I think I'm actually going to neaten up and give out for free. So if anybody wants it, definitely reach out to me. But essentially, it's going to be a legacy life planner where there's these different questions and calculations. I'm connecting with, you could say, mindfulness, but I'm also using statistics and country data to fuel it. So just to give it a little bit of insight, like we'd have today's date on there, how old you are currently now,
Yeah.
and a very taboo question, but how many more years you think you have left to physically live. And then I show you and then I show you a structure for how you can break down that time and really get clear on what you want to create in that time so that you live a life where you're really embracing living, where you are creating a sense of legacy from before. And if anything comes up and you think, I'm not going to have time for that, if grief comes up for that, rather than it be a state of silent avoidance in your heart, you address it so then you can still continue to live a good life.
Beautiful. Wow. And so how can they get that resource?
Definitely just drop me a message on my Instagram or send me an email at Dion at thebodysagemethod.com.
Brilliant.
And then I'll send it direct.
Amazing. Thank you so much again, Dion. It's been an absolute honor having you on, and just so many interesting and really thought-provoking insights that you've shared today. Really, really appreciate that. And I'm sure my listeners will too. And yeah, brilliant to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been great.
Amazing. So yeah, that's all we have time for today, my beautiful people. Hope you enjoyed the show. Please do reach out if you have any questions about anything that we discussed. And until the next episode, stay blessed, my friends.